Welcome to the Weekly Takeaway. What you need to know from the news. Some of the stories we'll consider this week are, first of all, your weekly COVID-19 update because you're not getting enough news about the coronavirus. We'll jump into that in just a moment. Also, Iranian Navy takes on the United States military. And finally, we'll learn that Zoom rules do not apply everywhere. Some great stories today, and we'll start at the top with your COVID-19 update. A lot of things happening in the world of coronavirus, and you may be overwhelmed with this. This week, we have heard from our president that the economy will be opening up on May 1st. There are a lot of rules associated with this, a lot of structure that's been put in place, but it looks like things are moving the right direction, and we're all thankful for that. Many of these things will unfold over the next several days, and maybe as we get to and through the weekend, we'll know more. But it looks like eventually we'll be able to leave our homes, which every homeschooling parent is thankful for. Parents across the country applauding the president, standing up, and thankful that he decided we can go outside of our homes, particularly those in Michigan. We'll come to them in just a moment. A lot of rules associated with this. As I mentioned, it looks like the governors will have a lot of say on how exactly they open up their respective states. Each state is dealing with this in a little bit of a different way, and so depending on the things that they are dealing with right now in terms of how many and how often, how frequent, and how long it's been since they've started downward on that curve, they'll be able to put some of these things in place. We're excited about that. We'll see how all of this unfolds, and certainly we knew that this was going to happen, just didn't know exactly when. And I think all of us are praying that our economy will bounce back quickly. There certainly will be some implications to what has happened to the future of our economy and our country. I don't know that we'll ever return to normal, whatever normal was, but hopefully we'll appreciate what is a little bit more than we did in the past. And meanwhile, so while all of that is happening, we now have governors around the country who are setting up their own little fiefdoms. They have gotten some control and they don't want to let go of it. Maybe you, like me, have seen for the first time the reality that there are politicians in place who not only speak of having power, we've all suspected this about them, but once they got power based on a crisis across the country, they are unwilling to let it go. We've seen in places across the country, including Michigan. I mentioned that a moment ago. The governor of Michigan is out of her mind, and I don't know how you define that exactly. That's not a clinical diagnosis. It's just observation. She's out of her mind. And it has become so draconian in the state of Michigan that many people have marched on the Capitol. That's happening right now. They've created a gridlock trying to keep people from getting to the Capitol building and away from it, and to send a message really to their governor that we're Americans and that she is a governor, not a king. We'll see how that all unfolds, but many things like that are happening across the country, and it's going to be interesting over the next couple of weeks. I think one of the big takeaways from all of this, and this is an important takeaway, is that for many, this is the first time in their lifetime they've been concerned about what the Constitution says. Now, we're thankful for the Constitution. As Americans, we know it is the document that creates the structure for the society that we live in. We're thankful for that. It's an important piece to us. But for the first time, maybe ever, many are asking, what does the Constitution say about that? When the president does this, and the governors then do that, and the mayors do this other thing, what does the Constitution say? What rights do these individuals have, and how will all of this play out? And as we consider a takeaway, here's the takeaway. Understand how your country runs. Read the Constitution. Understand the Bill of Rights. Understand that there is a structure that guides these decisions. We've been in a time of at least what's been presented as emergency. Now again, depending on where you fall on all of this, you may believe it was an emergency, you may not, but certainly an emergency declaration was made. Because of that, we in society have gone along with some crazy measures that have kept us at home and kept businesses closed, but this cannot go on forever, regardless of what many lawmakers think. Why? Because we have a Constitution and we have a Bill of Rights, and the government cannot, despite their best efforts, prevent those things from creating the rule under which we all live. It's important, and this is a great takeaway. Teach your children, understand yourself, so that when we have these moments of crisis, we know how our government should respond. An important takeaway. We switch to our second story for today, and a crazy story. This would fall into the category of we will never learn our lesson. the Iranian military and the country of Iran. Now, it seems as though they're standing on a train track waiting for the train to run them over. It hasn't yet, but it's going to eventually. And if they don't get off the track, they're going to get hurt. This last week, several Iranian Navy vessels got very, very close to American Coast Guard ships as well as Navy ships. And those ships, ours, the United States militaries, were doing some exercises in international waters. The Iranian military is trying to provoke the most powerful nation on the planet while everyone who is controlling that military is in a really bad mood. Because everyone's in a bad mood right now. This is not the time to mess around with the people who can shoot missiles at you and sink your ships in the ocean. But that is indeed what's happening. There's a lot there. We're at a moment in time where many countries, including Iran, are calling for the United States to back off on the sanctions that we've imposed on Iran because of their nuclear testing and their other problems throughout their region. They're asking us to ease up and to trust them. Meanwhile, they're trying to provoke us into some kind of combat action. It doesn't make sense, but it is indeed happening. All of this, again, on the heels of our president authorizing the killing of Soleimani, a terrorist from Iran who was wreaking havoc throughout the Middle East. And we have demonstrated, we being our president and his administration, have demonstrated not only a willingness but an ability to deal with problems that are deemed harmful or potentially harmful to America and its allies. And yet, here we are. Again, what's the takeaway? There are so many, and here's a big one. As we in the continental United States deal with what people around the world are dealing with, this COVID-19 issue, this pandemic that's caused so many of us to stay at home and homeschool for the first time and work from a computer in our bedrooms, many of whom are not wearing pants. While we're doing that, elsewhere around the world, there are men and women who are standing in the gap, as they always do, as we remind you often, to defend the freedoms that we enjoy. Clearly, we have our own issues here in our country. We're trying to figure out how all of this works and trying to figure out how our government even will work as we move through this. But that does not remove the fact that there are people around the world that, if they had the opportunity, would do damage to us and our service members as they, again, stand in the gap to defend our freedoms abroad. And we're thankful that they do. Don't forget that the world around you right now, what you can see, the things you're dealing with right now, are not the only thing that's happening. And I'm thankful that we live in a country that, although we have our problems, we have our issues, we certainly have our infighting, we do have a constitution that governs how decisions will be made. We have a system that, although not perfect, has worked really well for a long time. And we have people that continue to do the jobs we need them to do, even when we are unaware often that they're doing them. What a great takeaway. And our final story today is one that helps us to remember, and please remember, that Zoom rules do not always apply. I mentioned last week as we came to our weekly takeaway that for the first time, probably in a lifetime, people across the country have learned about Zoom. Zoom has gone from some 20 million users to some 200 million users in a very short period of time. People who had never heard of Zoom now use Zoom for everything. My children are using Zoom for school and for other meetings. We're using them for small groups at church. We're using them for business meetings. Everything is happening on Zoom. And for whatever reason, it seems as though people who are on a Zoom call or a Zoom meeting do not feel the need to put on pants. I don't understand it. I'm wearing pants right now. I always wear pants. I'm not going to take them off just because only the top half of my body is showing. But apparently, on a Zoom call, proper etiquette is to drop your pants. This can be a real problem, particularly when you forget that you're on a call. But I digress. We learned this week that in Maryland, the police offered a friendly reminder to please put on pants when checking the mail. Please put on pants when checking the mail. What is our obsession with taking our pants off? Apparently we have one, and it's not just on Zoom calls. In fact, the Maryland police put out on their Facebook page a friendly reminder that when checking the mail or going out in public, it is not only important, but it is legally your obligation to put on pants. And they ended it by saying, quote, "You know who you are." Zoom rules do not always apply. A lot of great stories this week, a lot of things happening, of course, around the world. And hopefully you're keeping track of all of them. But there are some things you just need to know, and I would encourage you always, regardless of what the news may be, to find the takeaway. That thing that applies to you and those who you care about. I hope you're having a good week, and we look forward to talking to you next time.